Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to I Can't Shut Up Unless You Tell Me to. Now, for those watching on YouTube, here is some generic Elden Ring footage that I have. You can see Video Evan lurking down in the background. He'll be badly playing Elden Ring during this, but for those listening to the audio version, don't worry about it. Okay, so let's talk Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree real quick. This is going to be I'm going, don't, this is obviously, there's going to be spoilers and stuff present, given the footage you might see on screen on YouTube. But for those other who are in the Vite or those listening in audio, yes, so I have to be talking about certain details as it pertains to the Shadow of the Erdtree. And this will be a spoilery kind of review. It's not going to spoil everything, but I'm not going to be hiding, you know, in obfuscating things as much here. So, obviously, let's start with how I played, beat, and completed the game. I'm on journey 43. I have a level 604 character. So obviously the time spent here in the Shadowlands is a little bit different from people who might be doing it on their Journey 1 playthrough or even their first New Game Plus. God, New Game Plus 1, man, that is an experience. It makes things so much easier. It's insane, but I digress. Obviously you have to beat Moog and Radon. Why do you have to beat Moog? Well, Ventrance is in his council room. How do you beat Radon? Well, Radon is important to the story. He's fucking solos. The first thing I kind of want to address with this is the difficulty allegations. Yes, Shadow of the Erdtree is hard. But no, the people whining and bitching about the difficulty in it are not necessarily people that, Miyazaki said, hey, if you're going to play this game, like, you're going to have to get this, the Skibidi Tree fragments, the Shadow Tree fragments that you find that upgrade both your damage resistance and damage output. And then there's just a bunch of people that said, oh, that's going to make the game too easy. I'm not going to do that. And then these people will then write a negative review of Shadow of the Erdtree, is bitching about the difficulty of it, even though they're not really engaging in the exploration aspect of Shadow of the Erdtree. The whole purpose of Elden Ring, and I maintain this, is replacing the tenacity and perseverance of the Dark Souls games and previous FromSoft titles with exploration. You don't need to beat your head against a boss for 15 hours trying to beat it like you had to in Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, and Bloodborne or Sekiro. You can just fuck off and go somewhere else and find get some levels, find another boss, talk about your time, beat that boss, get rich from that, find a new spell, find a new weapon, find a new armor, and then come back and trounce the boss once you've gotten a few levels and some toys. Like, this is how you're supposed to play Elden Ring. And a lot of people refuse to do that because stubbornness, and they say, I want to play it the way I want to play, which is completely valid. But then these are the same types of folks that will subsequently shit on people for using spirit summons and tell you that's not how you're supposed to play the game, blah, 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 blah. I digress. To address penultimately the scaling of damage in Shadow of the Erdtree, so long as you are exploring and collecting your Skibidi Tree fragments or whatever the fuck they're called, you're going to have a perfectly fine time. Also, make sure you pick up your revered spirit ashes. Yes, you may not want to use summons during your playthrough. They also make it so Torrent can take more than a hit ever. So also that's important to keep in mind. The scaling in the game from start to finish is solid. The game is relatively well balanced. Obviously, once you hit, Skibidi Tree level 120, which is the max level, everything kind of becomes optimal. Early bosses like the Divine Beast, Ranella, and everything basically you fight before Mesmer, uh, is in a better spot. Honestly, you obviously you're going to be you're not going to be beating them as easily as on your New Game Plus fighting Godric or Market. You're not going to be clipping into them for that with that much damage that same way. But what can happen with it is more so a fact of you're probably curb stomping them to the level that you would curb stomp Market. It's solid health bar, but you're dodging properly and you're dealing more damage than you would have otherwise at skibidi toilet tree level 5 at 15 at 20. You're doing more damage than you were at the 5 or 6 levels you had then, especially with the balance patch, which I would argue is probably called for on the side of FromSoft, making it so that the early levels you gain are more beneficial than the later levels. But the upgrading from 19 to 20 is the largest bonus you get, which is probably the way it should have been, like a much more hump. I think that is probably going to be helpful for people, but by and large, the balancing across all of the bosses is really solid. But I will say that, as far as the bosses and stuff are concerned, and the boss fights themselves, the only time I didn't really have to change anything about my build per se until I got to the last boss, which I'll talk about a little bit later. That was frustrating. I do think that in true FromSoft tradition, the entire DLC being more difficult than the base game, obviously, and then the last boss just being a ball busting pain in the ass is in line. I will say that there are some poorly designed aspects of to it, and I'll get to that a little bit later. For the time being, though, I want to talk about the different zones in general. You start on the Gravesite Plains, which is the all the promotional materials you see of Mikola on Torrent, with the Skidoo tree, which is with the Scud tree, which is the more proper representation of the big old tree in the center. And what ends up happening is go into these plains, a bunch of ghost graves around. Large open area, some things to see, things tucked in behind cliffs. I think the first boss I fought in the game was the Black Jail Knight. Pretty interesting boss fight. Has a Slave Knight Gale, crossbow, so it has that fun attack. Jesus Christ, in a confined space. But I beat that, and that was perfectly all well and good. There's one Furnace Golem. Furnace Golems being the giant, Wickerman burning things that you could see in certain places, in some of the promotional materials. It's not an intuitive fight. It's not a super intuitive experience. In that, I think that you kind of just have to kind of figure out what to do. Just a pro tip for anybody who hasn't been able to figure it out or just wants some help with that: don't bother damaging them if they have unarmored legs, which all except 2 have. Just whack them in their feet. Every time they lift their feet up their 1 foot up to do the AoE, just jump to avoid it. Jumping is more reliable than dodging it. Whenever the entire thing jumps up into the air, run away, and then after it comes down, after it hits the ground, wait a half second, then jump to dodge the AoE. Make sure you run far enough away to get away from the explosion, and then immediately run back. If you get too far away from the Furnace Golems, they'll start doing their AoE, their ranged attacks, which will kill you. It's better to just hug them and kill them. If they are armored, usually if they have armored legs, there is usually a spirit well you can find, jump up with Torrent, and then just attack from above. You'd be better off. You would be recommended to use hefty hefty fire pots. They, for some reason, do obscene amounts of damage when you throw them directly into the Wickerman's like head. So the more you know. Otherwise, I will say, you meet NPCs. The NPCs and storylines in this game are going to be super critical to your enjoyment and your experience, and also the different outcomes. There's a boss fight just before the final boss where, depending on how many quest lines you've done, routes you've taken in said quest lines, um, that will ultimately determine whether or not like how many people you fight in a boss fight, which is a gang fight, by the way. Spoilers. Like if you don't do if you can have a couple NPCs come with you and fight on your side by completing their quest lines. You can have some NPCs not appear on the opponent's side by giving the certain dialogue options when talking to them, and you can also spirit summon during this. So you can at worst you're going to have a 5v of 1, 2, 3, 4, 4/5v1 or 2 if you use a spirit summon, and at best it'll be a 3v3 or a 3v4, because you've done your due diligence. I digress. The voice acting and the storytelling in these NPC quests is quite lovely, and I think it's really great. They also added a couple new different things as well, a couple new weapons. They have these subtype of weapon called Smith Script, which these are weapons that can create new weapons that fade away out of nowhere. Also added the ability of like usable throwing knives. These are called the Smith Script daggers. What will happen is that when you throw them, a new one will appear in your hand immediately, and it does when you attack using knife attacks. It also throws them out, so you have a ranged dagger weapon, which are very, very nice. These Smith Script daggers can also be used wet blades to turn them into status effects generators, although I will say the best status effect generators that they've added were probably the new perfume weapons, the perfumer bottle weapons. So instead of perfumes solely being consumable items, which they still are, you now have 1, 2, 3, 4, I believe 4 perfumer weapons now that do different types of damage. You have the poison one that does physical, the frost one does magic, and then you have the frenzied flame perfume bottle and the fire perfume bottle that do flame damage. And all of them come with all of those status effects. The perfume bottles of poison, frost, and frenzied flame all inflict poison, frost, and badness respectively. This means that the perfumer's talisman is now a viable option, something to consider. Plenty of they have now added backhanded blades. These are you have your normal your typical backhanded blade, which is just a weeaboo weapon, and then you have like your curved blades with the circular blades, which function as like dancing blades. They're interesting enough. I'm not a fan personally. I think backhanded blade was useful, but once I got access to the Valks, which is a curved sword that can be power stance to have 2 weapons on at once, I was kind of with bleed. It was kind of rough. I will say bleed by and large has been like the champion. Bleed and to a lesser extent Frost has kind of been the W winner in my time as Shadow of the Erdtree, especially when I was at lower Skadootree. And if we're talking about status effects and things of that nature, one of the things I also want to reiterate is the fact that holy damage is actually really fucking viable. Even enemies you would think would be strong against holy damage aren't. Even the final boss, which just does bonkers holy damage to you, is not resistant to it. I think the FromSoft team kind of realized that, hey, holy damage is basically fucking useless in basically the second half of the fucking game. So we're going to make the holy damage usable. And usable they did. They added a few new incantations that I think are very, very fun. I think the big one I like is the Holy Arc, big Holy Arc. It's just a giant cone. It's just a giant arc of holy damage that is able to touch walls and not immediately break. It's quite nice. They also added a new spin to win discus that instead of coming back to you after you throw it, will stay where it hit and can deal continuous damage. This is a very very good option as far as holy damage is concerned to deal constant chip damage to bigger enemies because it sticks around for quite a while and you can throw it unbelievably far. The next thing I want to note is just continuing on with the Graveside Plains. Final the bot you go left, go into the Belarus Tower settlement, a very interesting place, kind of seeing the sins of the Greater Will or the Golden Order among the people here. I don't really want to talk about too much about the lore in this episode, if I'm being perfectly honest. I do want to talk about moving on to the next area, the Cerulean Coast, one of the most gorgeously designed FromSoft locations in any of their games. It is just a sea of blue, deep blue, and light blue flowers. It is gorgeous. There isn't a whole ton here. There's a couple like Spincher stuff, but if I'm being perfectly honest, the above ground, area is, to me personally, I think so much more could have been done in this area because it is gorgeous, and outside of a mausoleum, a couple bosses, some hidden things, and the going second point to do one of the NPCs Stolier's quest to talk to St. Trina. More could have been done here with the space, and I'm bummed that it wasn't, but beggars can't necessarily be choosers, unfortunately. Ultimately, from here, once we're done in this Cerulean Coast, you go through a castle. You fight Renella, who is apparently, fun fact, Renella's little sister, who uses something called the Two Moons sorcery, which is basically a three explosive shockwaves that hit like fuck all when you use it, but will murk your ass if you use it IRL. If you get used it against you from the boss. Very interesting boss fight. Magic and fire kind of represented in two. She dropped her remembrance weapon as a two-handed sword that I think is very very interesting. Or is a weapon that are just two swords that you can power. It's very interesting, and I think and it goes well with an amulet of hers, the Renella amulet, which the longer you hold a stance before using an attack, it's kind of busted. Moving on once you get past this point, or you find like the way around the boss room there, you get to the Scud Atlas, Scud Tree. I think it's called Scud Tree. The Scud Atlas, Scud Altus, my bad, which is the parallel to the Altus Plateau. From here, you have a few different options. You can head northwest and head to the Cathedral of Mitis Miter, this is where you're going to find most of your sorceries in the DLC. This DLC was very generous with incantation. Sorceries kind of like didn't get as much, and most of the sorceries you're going to find are through the quest line here, as well as, most interestingly, after it's resolving, a remembrance that gives you access to a glintstone staff that can also be used to cast incantations and skills off of both strength, intelligence, and faith. Very interesting. And honestly, like, as much as I love having something like the Open Arc staff that has arcane scaling and things of that nature, so just get that extra boost on like Blood Blossom Frost. Personally, I think it's like a more reliable to like have access to both toolboxes, because this is the first time I've started using sorceries at all, and it's been wonderful to use both personally. Moving on. You from the Scud from Scud Altus, you can also head south, you can getting access to Karo's Grave. Karo's Grave is a kind of a parallel to the Cerulean Coast with beautiful red. Now this red and blue and deep blues. This is all reds and grays. It feels wrong here in certain regards. Sad even. There isn't a whole ton here. You can find a couple delves that you get some pretty cool loot from. You can find a furnace golem here that you have to throw in hefty fire pots from above, and this will ultimately give you access to the tier. By the way, the furnace golems, they hold the new wondrous physics tiers. In fact, if you are a Sekiro fan, if you beat the golem out front at the 3 cross site of grace in the gravesite plains, he drops a crimson tier that effectively kind of lets you be able to play a version of Sekiro in Elden Ring. So the more you know. Moving on, the next place that you can only get through this by going through it is one of those places that you can only get to by going through there's a lot of regions that are only accessible by going through catacombs or caves, and if you don't go through those specific catacombs or caves, you don't access these regions. One of these is the Jagged Peak, which has one of the best examples of voice acting and character acting this year. And that is with Egon, the Drake Hunter. I think that they could, if they had cut this entire thing from the DLC and then put out like a $10, $20 DLC called the Dragon Peaks Ascent or whatever, and then you basically made it so you're like the whole gig is like ascending this mountain for the purposes of slaying this evil dragon at the top that these NPCs you run into just revile to with every fiber of their being. I will say that I think that I would have bought it. I would have think it'd been great. Like this feels like it was like this quest line and quest that you do is completely detached from the rest of the game. And that's the same that can be said with the cathedral where you get all the sorceries from. Like they are quest lines that are detached entirely from the ongoings of Mikola and all of that shit, which it's a fun little ROM to do, and I think it's quite enjoyable. The Ascent of Dragon Peak is really, really awesome. It feels like a hero's quest type of thing, hero's journey type of thing, all encompassed within Shadow of Erdtree, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's quite lovely. I think in the next place you could probably go to from there is I think that's all. I think that's all you basically kind of ask. So you can go to the base base Rahu, which is like this giant like ruins to the northeast that you get access to through the Shadow Keep, which is Mesphick's fortress, the patron of the DLC. And there's the top half and the bottom half, and both can be are accessed in different ways. But there's some cool stuff down there. There's nothing really so important aside from maybe like fighting one of the big bears and getting the bear incantations and stuff. There's not really much otherwise I think I can contribute there that sounds necessarily interesting. Mesmer is the first truly difficult like balls to the walls get fun type of fight. I thought Renella felt like that, but it's not necessarily the case. Mesmer, a good equivalent for Mesmer I would give is Malenia. If you were able to beat Malenia and you were able to be comfortable with Malenia's like tells and knowing like how to dodge and things of that nature, you will be able to do Mesmer, no problem. It just takes practice learning his movesets and things of that nature, and that can be frustrating, but otherwise I think it's quite good. That's for his first phase. His second phase, a little bit bullshit. I recommend not de-locking on for certain attacks. But otherwise, I think it's completely doable without summons of that nature. Just a reminder, when you are doing summons and stuff within the game, there are going to be cases of, certain quest lines will have certain outcomes if you do or do not summon them during boss fights. So remember that it's your own prerogative. The other thing I want to remind everybody that all of the bosses in this game, their AI has been optimized to expect multiple combatants. So, if you genuinely don't want a spirit summon doing real damage like Mimic Tear, Black Knight Tish, or any or Omen or Nepheli Lu, go pick up the little shield boys, like the Great Shield Wraiths or whatever, and use them just to, occasionally pull aggro so you can heal the buff. These bosses are, they will fight your ass. They will fight your ass, and they will be on your ass like white on rice. It's rough. As far as Messmer's concerned, he's a good boss fight. He's perfectly fine. He's kind of like I would say he's pretty much like on par with Melania. Other than that, I don't. It's an excellently, very well built boss fight. Cool lore, cool dialogue, cool cutscenes. No notes. I loved it. It's great. In fact, Let Me Solo Her has rebranded to Let Me Solo Him, and has focused on the boss fight. There is on Mesmer, it's like, I'm not touching that final boss. Fuck that. And I'm like, I completely understand. Moving from there, you move on to Queen, like a Mother of the Bud or whatever, just a Scarlet Ross Scorpion boss, whatever. It's not that hard, not that bad. If you've got like a high enough immunity to like handle Scarlet Rod, it's generally not that big of a deal fight. Generally good telegraphs. The process of getting to that boss fight is a bit of a nightmare, if I'm being perfectly honest. I hate it every second of it. That region is notoriously bad. And in terms of like trying to find a way around, it's a giant maze, lots of falling off of ledges, lots of enemies. It can be kind of rough, if I'm being perfectly honest. But it is a gorgeous area, so I'm willing to forgive all of that frustration for how fucking pretty it is. From there, you get on to Ilium Inir, I think is how you pronounce it. It's probably not how you pronounce it, but that's how I'm going to pronounce it. Ilimir, Ilinir, Ilir. What the fuck is that spelling? Hold on. Enir Ilum. Ugh. It's spelled ENIR hyphen LLIN. Enir Ilum. It's a legacy dungeon. Pretty cool legacy dungeon. That's kind of like the second half of the Belarus Tower settlement. But you can just there's an elevator connecting the two. It's pretty cool. I will say that fighting through this dungeon takes a lot. But once you know the path, you can kind of run through most of it without issue. There are some pretty powerful warriors and stuff in it that will be worried. Eventually, you get to a room which is where you have to fight all of the NPCs that you have had, made friends and stuff with up until this point. So bear in mind, be careful that you will end up having a rough time of it. If you don't do spirit summons, because like imagine like a 5v1, like a 4 or 5v1 PvP match. That's what the fuck you're dealing with. So summons are justifiable at that, even if you are one of those no summons peoples. And the really awesome thing about this boss fight is that as the boss fight rages on, like NPCs are like having conversations and in dialogue with each other, and depending on the number of quests you've done and how much you finished, you'll have lots of, depending on what quests that you've finished, what things you've done, all of that stuff. The dialogue will be different, and it'll be respectful. It's a very somber. It's like a bittersweet type of fight type of thing. Like Needle Knight Led is the only one that wants hands. Same thing with Riley Dane. But talking more and Tholier talking Red Main Knight with the Red Main Knight and and Ansbach talking, Ansbach and Letta. Like it's all very sad and kind of melancholy. And I do wish that there was a way to like story wise side with Mikola more so, and kind of like letting letting the that go through, but you can't, unfortunately, which is, I don't know, it's sad and upsetting like that. Like I'm interested in seeing what they would do story wise, but you get through that, with all the NPCs and all that beautifully written dialogue and stuff, you get to the final boss room, and it's Prime Radon. And here's kind of where my praise of the DLC is kind of going to go down the toilet. This is the one boss in the game that I think kind of like invalidates a lot, like the stuff I've said in the past. I don't have to change my build that much for most bosses in Elden Ring. I tend to run a very fire heavy build, and fire heavy builds for things like Fire Giant may not like be kosher, whatever. The problem is that ultimately I have to maybe change weapons. I don't really have to like change my actual strategy that much. With Radon, and with Promise Consort Radon in both phases, I am stacking heavy. I'm stacking heavy armor, fingerprint shield, and a great lance that does bleed. And I just block poke. Yes, I know it's campy. No, I don't want to do it. The problem is that while the first phase of Radon is difficult, very difficult, yes, but has very tight but clear things that you can do to dodge attacks and strategies done therein. The problem mostly comes in with phase 2, because he has all of those movesets that he has in phase 1, and also every single attack he does has an explosion of light beams come up underneath you. So there really is, even if you are dodging into him completely, you're still getting hit with damage. At the very least, some chip damage. It is not enjoyable to deal with. And if you try to dodge the light, you get hit by his main attack, which does so much more damage. You're eventually just like... Here's the thing. His base form doesn't really give you time to necessarily heal either. Like there are definitive times you can heal, but you have to choose: do I hit him or do I heal? And a lot of times, like in the first round, like, oh yeah, you can dodge it flawlessly and then hit him. No need to heal. Everything's fine. The problem is that once you get to phase 2, do you heal or do you hit? And you're just going to end up always hitting or always healing. Not necessarily, like, I'm being hyperbolic. It's not that bad to that degree. I mean, but it is close. The other thing that you kind of also have to deal with is that he'll have these dash attacks where he will hit you repeatedly in fast succession with attacks, and unless you like block or are able to sort of like dodge around it and at such an angle that you only take like one hit from it, then you can do it. But it is, I haven't seen anybody necessarily been able to accomplish that just yet. And the best way I've seen to dealing with that particular attack is by blocking. Find a great shield. The other thing that I think and the last thing I think that is like very, very frustrating to deal with is he has like the flying in the sky meteor attack that he has from the base game. The difference is in the base game, you get hit twice with the explosion, just in case like you dodge it properly or whatever. In this, I've noticed that it hits you thrice. So unless you like have other things drawing aggro where you're able to get just far enough out of the radius by running and dodging that you're okay. It's real in the radius is, I think, larger too. So it's really difficult, if not impossible, to dodge. So combining this with attack, like difficult if not impossible to dodge attacks. I won't say impossible. Nothing's impossible, but like nearly impossible to dodge attacks. attacks that are constantly dealing you chip damage with no really outside of stacking holy damage negation. There's really nothing done there, and an aggressive attack pattern that doesn't necessarily lead much options for healing. You're along with like a giant AOE explosions that are done. You're in for a rough time. Also, by the way, if you get grabbed twice, you instantly die. You instantly lose the encounter. So the final boss fight, I think, the fact that I had to change my entire build and no amount of time I spent trying to figure it out, I spent probably 8 hours. I spent probably a solid on stream 7 to 8 hours trying to do it the normal way, and then I spent about 2 hours doing it like the done way, and I did it. And it doesn't feel good. I think that's like kind of the low point of the DLC, the final boss. Now it's balls to the walls, slap you down hard. God knows I knew that I used like the Remembrance Reharvesters afterwards to get all three of there are in fact three things that drop from Primer Dawn and Megala's Remembrance. I made sure to get them all in one go, so I never have to do that fight again. I mean, I could go and do that fight again. I mean, now that I know like what I have to do, it's not that big of a deal. It's just I like sticking with like the same kind of like build strategy when I'm doing it, and I don't necessarily shift that too. I digress. I think ultimately my time with Shadow of the Erdtree has been great. There's still more things I have to explore. I still have to collect all of the items. I still have to upgrade all of the items. A lot of work to be done. Thankfully, they are very, very generous with both somber and regular ancient dragon smithing stones. So, at the very least, on subsequent playthroughs of going through the Shadowlands, the amount of what are they called? Smithing stones and grave warts are going to be more easily obtained. Some of the new ashes of war are amazing. Some of the new spirit ashes are really, really cool. Definitely worth giving a shot. And I do think that ultimately y'all are going to have a great time with this DLC if you haven't already. I loved it. I want to spend even more time in the Shadowlands, and I will be for the foreseeable future. But I think at present we will be going back to our regularly scheduled programming. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for listening. I appreciate your time, and your listenership. At time of recording, there will probably be a Skyrim New Game Plus run. I've got it with some month. I was able to start to make a New Game Plus run in Skyrim, so I'm looking forward to seeing that at time of recording, or at time of posting. It'll be at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so I'd love to see all that. Otherwise, you can check out when I'm live at himedia.gg/live. Our schedule is there. Anywho, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for listening. Thank you so very much for watching. Please support us at himedia.gg/tip. $1 a month is a boon to my mental health and gives you benefits and access in our Discord to exclusive access videos, early access videos, and more. Please, I am very poor. Thank you so very much for listening to this Elden Ring review. I appreciate y'all, your time, and your listenership. Have a wonderful rest of your day.